Good afternoon, Bronx Arts. It's Mr. Naruski, and this video will help you for Thursday's classwork assignments. We're in the midst of looking at our divided nation, how sectionalism shows loyalty and devotion to your region instead of your nation. And that's really starting to drive our country on edge. There's a lot of tension between different sections and people living in it. And one of those things that is being debated about is slavery. We introduced that today, what slavery looked like in America between the years 1619 and 1865. Over 200 years of slavery in this country. We introduced some things today. We're going to continue to look at slavery in America, and this assignment will kind of give you an opportunity to research some key events that happened in that whole time period itself. So if you open up Google Classroom and you will see Thursday's work, May 7th. You're going to be creating your own timeline assignment with 4 events. So there are 2 attachments. The first one is a Google Doc reading. This is where the assignment is. This is where the directions are. It is a read-only document, so don't ask me for request. All you have to do is read this. You'll have access, I hope, to these 2 sites along the ways. But a little bit of background. From the earliest colonial times to the end of the Civil War, slavery existed in the United States. As America expanded, the question of slavery became more debatable and caused conflict. There were a number of significant events that impacted the growth and eventually elimination of slavery. So what I like you to do in a timeline is to think of from beginning to end what is going on with slavery in America. And you are to create a timeline with 4 events from the history of slavery, 1619 to 1865. Research events that are significant in telling the history of slavery using these helpful sites. So I've listed both of these. You could have the attachment is there. The first one is Slavery in America, a timeline, and the second one kind of gives you a background and information about all the years of slavery. Use those 2 sites. They're really, really helpful. You may want to choose events that are most important and have an impact on slavery in America. Don't just pick the first few events and kind of use that, but think about things that really stand out to you, really important and significant. Think about causes and effects. What were some reasons for slavery beginning in the first place? How did slavery expand? And eventually, how did slavery end? You're going to use the Google Draw template that is attached to complete your work. And when you're finished, I believe you're going to be able to turn in your timeline drawing. So when you go back to Google Classroom, you're going to see this timeline. This you can edit. This you can make additions to it. And if you look at the timeline, there are 4 events, and they start from the left and they continue going to the right. On the far left is the year 1619, and that's where your timeline begins. Your first event probably should be somewhere around that time period, and your events should go in chronological order, meaning from beginning to end. You want to put those events carefully in order. If that means you got to kind of move something around, you can. If you notice, the whole kind of box and the little lines here kind of move along the timeline. You could adjust those things, but you need 4 events, and for each event, I'd like you to come up with the date and topic. So what was the year? What is the event kind of about, if you could place that in at the top? And then most important is key information, why important. This should have some detail. What is going on in that event? You might need a little research from the sites that I gave you. You may need to do a little more on your end as well. If you run out of space, if you need a little more space in your box, you can always click on the box and make it bigger. And then that way it could shift the size a little bit. If you want to make the box a little bigger, you certainly can as you continue that way. So 4 events, and they're critical. I'm going to sample just the first one with you guys. And in order to do that, I have this site. I'm going to use the second link 400 years since slavery, a timeline in American history. I like this because there are graphics. It is very easy to kind of read and identify, and it goes in chronological order, so that's going to help us as well. If I look at this, 1619, here's a key concept, I think. After the first captives were forced on to Virginia's shores by a Dutchman in 1619, the majority of the country remained white and relied mainly on labor of Native American slaves and white European indentured servants. It was not until the end of the 17th century that the transatlantic slave trade made its impact on the American colonies. So if I look at this chart, the number of African slaves brought to the British North America and the United States, when I see 1619, I see 1620 to 1700, there's a small amount of slaves being brought to the United States at this time. There are still Native Americans that are being kind of enslaved. There are white European indentured servant. An indentured servant is someone that was going to work for a period of time and then kind of win their independence. It's not until about the 1700s and then the 1800s where there's a huge increase in slaves in this country. So my first topic is, if I go to my timeline, event number one, I have the date 1619, first African slaves arrive to America. And if you want to change the color around things to make it kind of stand out, you're more than welcome to. If you want to change the font, you can. The more you kind of take creativity, the stronger your grade will go. But I have the date. It's 1619. The first African slaves arrived. That's one of the first topics on my timeline that I feel is critical and important. So it's kind of going to go in that first event. Why was this important, or what did I take from this? A small number of African slaves being sold at this time. So as my sentences kind of expand, I could start to make my box a little bigger to include more things. And I'm gonna need a couple of sentences here to really explain what I'm talking about. So I just started to create the gist of what was important and key information. Small number of African slaves being sold at this time. The slave trade, slow to begin in colonial America. So we don't see a large amount early on, but that's going to change as your topics continue that way. You need 4 events. That's my first event kind of modeled for you guys. You guys can continue until 1865. If you continue down here, you're going to see some key information. You're going to see a lot of different events, key things that really, really stand out. We talked a little bit about the American Revolution and what that meant for African Americans or slaves at this time. What I don't want to see is this, taking this whole thing, copying it, and then pasting it onto our timeline. That's not going to give you any credit. That's plagiarism. We're not copying information. You could write the gist. You could paraphrase that information. I think this site is critical and really, really important. And so is this one. This one kind of shows you a timeline, and you can actually go through it year by year. If you click on this, the timeline will kind of move forward. There's great videos along the ways. If you really want to take your research to the next level and do a great job on this, this is really key for you. You could stop and pause at times, and you'll really see the true history of slavery using this site. So I like both. Make your timeline interesting, make your timeline stand out. Once you have 4 events, you could turn in. I believe there's going to be a turn in button for you. If not, you could always share it with me in my email as well. Guys, I'm going to be on tomorrow at 9:30, our Google Meet. As always, I look forward to seeing you if you have any questions about your assignment. Have a great night.